Hey there, I'm back for another lesson in our series of business management training, and this one is going to be called Wealth Comes from Relationships. And my friend, I can tell you that building relationships is probably the number one trait that you could acquire in the world of business that'll get you more than way farther along than you ever dreamed possible. And if you don't take the time to build relationships, it's probably going to be the other way around. You're in it all by yourself, and nobody wants to be in it all by themselves. Building relationships is not difficult if you just keep a few things in mind. Number one, relationships are two-sided. It's not about what can you do for me, it's about what can I do for you. You always want to open up a discussion, especially when you're in networking environments like at our events and like some of the marketing events, the Dan Kennedy events. And I intentionally take staff at least 3 or 4 times a year to outside events with no other purpose in mind except to create more relationships. In fact, these are training events. They all have a format. They all have stuff that are germane to why we're going. That's not really why we go. We don't go to listen to people on the stage. We go to create the relationships. And I'm talking about business relationships as well as personal relationships. And if your attitude is that everywhere I go, I'm trying to create new friends and relationships, but that I want to first find out what I can do for them and not what they can do for me, then you will discover quickly that the conversation will change, the attitude will change, the cooperation level will change. So the next time you get into a RIA meeting or any kind of a meeting at all where you can network with other people, say, hey, what can I do to help you grow your business? And just let them talk, and I promise you pretty soon it's going to come right back, okay, well, what can they do for you? And that's how relationships are created. And I've got a list of things here that I'd like to discuss, all of which we covered our business management boot camp, incidentally, which I'd like for you to join me on if you can. It's 3 days with me. It's coming up soon, and you can go see it at ronsbusinessmanagement.com. I only do it twice a year. But here's a few things for you to consider when you're trying to build relationships. One, do you talk more than you listen? Are you one of those folks who always has to be talking, always has to control the conversation, always has to butt in the middle of a sentence? I hate that. I hate that. And I can't take much of that. I'm trying to get a point across because I'm asked or because it's my turn, and then all of a sudden I get chopped off right in the middle. Is that you? If it is you, fix it right now because it pisses off the person you're trying to talk to on the other side. I hate it when I get cut off. So you got to consciously work toward not interrupting the person on the other side. Listen more than you talk, and watch what happens to who actually is in control of this conversation. The person doing the listening is in control. The person doing the talking might think they're in control, but they're not necessarily in control. All right, do you have anything meaningful to say, or is it obviously you're just trying to be nice? If you don't ask questions, everyone wants to get asked for advice. So ask questions. Don't preach. Don't try to teach. Ask questions that will lead to the other side to determine whether they have any interest in what you're trying to say or not. And here's another big mistake I see people making. They have to get their point across regardless of whether the person listening gives a rat's ass. If they don't care, they don't care. So instead of pounding the point in, you might want to screen for a little bit of interest and see if they even care first. I'll give you a good example of that. I was sitting this morning in a barber chair getting my hair cut. Look, don't I look pretty? Got my hair cut all pretty and all. And the barber and I opened this, he's the one that opened the conversation up, telling me how he was a realtor and all of that. And the conversation went on along, and I just let him talk and talk and talk, how he's been. Here's a barber cutting my hair, and he's a realtor. That ought to tell you something about his mindset. And we got into a conversation about mindsets, and he was telling me about how real estate was bad right now, and how the economy is bad, and the most money he's ever made was buying and selling houses, but here he is as a realtor, and now here he is cutting hair. You know, like I could believe anything he said. So I asked him, I said, all right, well then, why are you doing it now? He says, well, the economy's so bad, and it's scary, and I said, well, you are aware that the only real problem is located between your right ear and your left ear, and it's an attitude problem because this is the best time in 30 years to ever be in a house business. And I'm coming from a guy who's bought 2,000 of them right here in the city that you're in right now. So I thought he would be interested in learning more about that. Well, guess what? I could have sat there and preached for 10 minutes and certainly was qualified to do it, but it didn't take me long to figure out that he was cutting hair because that's what where he wanted to be, and nothing that anybody's going to say to him is going to change his mind. So instead of me doing the seminar, I just shut up and let him talk and let him finish cutting my hair. And I can promise you that was the best way for that conversation to go. So because you want to get your point across does not mean that they care. So find out if they even care first before you go blah, 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 and expect people to listen to you. I've been a teacher for a lot of years, guys. And I can tell you one thing I learned, it took a lot of years to learn, was that just because I'm talking does not mean that audience is listening. And even if they're listening, does not mean that they're absorbing. And only when I started issuing written tests did I really find out how much of the stuff I said actually got absorbed. So a mistake would be that just because your lips are flapping, that it's going into the ears that you're standing in front of. Not necessarily true. All right, next is, are you respectful of their time? If you want to build relationships, you probably ought to try to keep your promises. And the first time that somebody says they're going to be somewhere at a certain time and they show up late, already this relationship is soured, because I just don't like people that can't be on time. I know because I've been married to one for 46 years now, and I don't like it. I hate it. It just is a terrible way to start a relationship. And I can tell you numerous cases where people promised me they were going to be at a meeting at a certain time, and if they're late, I just cancel it, and then when they show up late, I say, sorry, we're on to the next meeting now. They can't believe that I would be so rude, and yet they were rude enough to not keep their promise. As far as I'm concerned, if you can't keep your promise to be on time, you can't keep any other promises either. So be on time. All right, and next. Do you offer to, when you're taking somebody out to lunch to pick their brain, for crying out loud, don't let them pay for the food. If you want to kill a relationship quickly, then want to split the check when you're sitting there picking somebody's brain and trying to get all the information out of them you can. That's not how you build relationships. Always be the one that picks up the check, and don't ever let a rich person pay for their own food, for crying out loud. That's actually an insult. Okay. Do you keep your commitments when you make them? And I can tell you right now that if you're having a little trouble with that, you probably ought to come spend some time with me. Let me teach you the art of the planner. People ask me all the time how I get so much done, and the answer is it's the planner. Now, I did a little lesson on it in this series a few lessons back, but I can tell you, if you don't have some way to write down what you were promised and what you promised other people you would do, it will not get done most of the time, and therefore you kill relationships. My friend, I can't tell you how many relationships and partnerships I have removed myself from because the other person can't deliver on promises that they make, and I'll tell you, that's the end of a relationship to me. Have you ever seen anybody that can work all day and not get a darn thing done? Well, I've seen a few of those, and it's easy to talk. It's easy to make promises. It's a lot harder to deliver them. So I'm separating myself from people very quickly that can't get anything done. They can't keep their own little promises, and they don't have any follow-up. And there's the big one. You want to kill a relationship? Kill follow-up. Don't follow up like you're supposed to. Just ignore follow-up and see how fast your relationships get killed. That's number one reason I think why relationships dissipate is because one of the parties just doesn't do any follow-up whatsoever. And in today's world of email, it's so easy. You hit the email, you press send, and you assume everything's hunky-dory. Well, here's some bad news about email. Number one, just because you sent it does not mean it got received. It may not have got through the spam blocker, it may not have got opened, it may not have got read because it was with the other 500 they were getting today. So for you to send it is not good enough. That's not follow-up. You have to assume that the other side got it and then verify that they got it. And be careful what you write in an email. If you want to kill a relationship, create a nasty email when you're mad. Do not answer an email when you're mad. Do not. Give yourself 24 hours to cool off, and I promise you, you'll see a totally different email than the one you almost blurted out because you were angry. Never answer an email when you're mad. And by the way, while I'm on that subject, you should remember that everything you put in print and send over the web is a permanent record and can be used against you in a court of law. And also, just know this, every time a website goes up, there's a site where you can go get those old websites. Just because you took a site down doesn't mean that it's gone. All the attorneys know how to get old websites. How do you think I know this? I defend myself in court all the time against emails and websites that people hanging around me created and or sent. So be very careful what you send in an email. Do not send one when you're mad. And follow-up is so important. Gotta follow up. Do what you say. Send the communication out. Make sure they got it. Make sure they replied. And do what you say. And if you'll just do that, if you'll just keep your word and follow up, you're already ahead of 90% of the people in the business world out there right now. And your relationships will build strongly when you do what you say and then some, because most people will not. Relationships are all about keeping your promises, following up, and making sure that you're not always a taker, that there's give involved. If you're going to be a taker, you got to be more of a giver. And look, it ain't going to hurt you one bit if you do more giving than you do taking. Try it sometime. I promise you, you'll probably get used to it because it works very well. That's enough for this lesson. See you on the next one.